She knew she was carrying more than plates that night. Valerie Connor balanced a silver tray of $200 canapes while the secret had been growing in her belly for 3 months. The pregnancy test in the pocket of her apron felt like lead, but fate had chosen the moment of disclosure. Thomas Montgomery's mansion in Beverly Hills was buzzing with 50 pharmaceutical executives. French crystal chimed, practiced laughs echoed across the 300-square-foot ballroom. Valerie moved among the guests with the trained invisibility of 3 years of impeccable service. No one looked at the 26-year-old maid. No one ever looked. That's when it happened. The test slipped from her pocket as she leaned to serve the Swiss ambassador. The white plastic hit the floor with a dry snap that silenced conversations within a 3-meter radius. For 2 seconds, no one moved. Then a woman in a red dress pointed. "My God, it's a pregnancy test!" Silence spread through the room like wine spilling on a white tablecloth. 50 pairs of eyes flicked between the test on the floor and Valerie, frozen. The 2 hot pink lines were unmistakable even from across the room. Thomas Montgomery crossed the room in 5 strides. 42 years old, an Italian suit worth $20,000, a Swiss watch worth $100,000 on his wrist. The yacht club tan on his face twisted into an expression Valerie had never seen in 3 years. "Pick that up now!" he hissed through his teeth. Valerie bent, fingers trembling. When she stood, she met his eyes, blue as winter ice. "Is it yours?" The question came low, venomous. The entire room held its breath. Marina Vance, Thomas's ex-wife, stepped forward with her phone already recording. Others followed suit. Within seconds, dozens of cameras were pointed at them. "Answer!" Thomas raised his voice. "Is that child mine?" Valerie kept her chin up. "Yes." The word fell into the room like a grenade. Murmurs exploded all around. The Swiss ambassador almost knocked over his champagne. Marina Vance smiled like a snake who'd found its nest. 3 years, Thomas began, his voice rising with each word. 3 years you've worked here. You washed my clothes, cleaned my bathroom, served my table, and now you come to me with this? I didn't come with anything. The test fell by accident. By accident? He laughed, bitter as gall. Nothing is accidental with people like you. You planned this, didn't you? You waited for the right moment. The house full of important witnesses. Valerie pressed the test to her chest. I was leaving today. After the party, everything was already packed. Of course you were. After securing the con. Thomas pulled his wallet from his inner pocket. The $100 bills appeared like magic. How much do you want? 20,000, 30, 50,000 to disappear and solve this problem? Each word was a slap. Valerie felt her legs wobble, but she did not give in. All around, the executives filmed everything. Some whispered among themselves, betting how much she would take. Come on, don't act like you're holy. Thomas separated 5 stacks of bills. $50,000, now, in your hand. Just take it and vanish forever. Keep your money. $60,000 then. I said I don't want it. Every maid has a price. What's yours? That was the straw that broke the camel's back. Valerie looked around the room, memorizing every face, witnessing her most humiliating moment. The Swiss ambassador, Marina Vance, Thomas's partners, all waiting for her to sell herself. Do you know the difference between us? Valerie asked, her voice surprisingly steady. You think money buys everything. I know some things have no price. She put the test back in her pocket and took off her apron. She folded it carefully, the way she had every night for 3 years. She placed it on the nearest table. Consider this my notice. I don't need a letter of recommendation. You can't just walk out. Thomas blocked her path. You're pregnant. It's my child. Now it's your child? Seconds ago it was a problem to fix. I'll call my lawyers. Gomez and Carmichael, Silver's Law, Montgomery and Associates, all of them. You don't know who you're messing with. Valerie stopped at the door to the ballroom. She turned one last time. You're right. I don't know who I'm messing with. Because the man I saw occasionally over these 3 years wouldn't act like this. But this man, she looked around. The one who humiliates a pregnant woman in front of 50 people. Him I truly don't know. She left. The silence she left behind louder than anything that had ever passed through those walls. 3 months before that fateful night, Valerie had discovered the pregnancy in a public restroom at the hospital where she'd taken her mother for a routine appointment. Mrs. Nora Connor waited outside, unaware that her daughter's life had just changed forever. The test trembled in Valerie's hands for 5 full minutes before she could process the 2 pink lines. It couldn't be. It had only been once. A single night when Thomas came home destroyed from the divorce, too drunk to drive, too human to keep the untouchable boss mask on. But it wasn't the test that changed everything. It was what Valerie discovered the following week when she took Mrs. Connor to pick up the lab results. The doctor casually mentioned that Mrs. Connor's kidneys were perfectly healthy for a 62-year-old, especially given a family history of kidney disease. Valerie froze. What family history? The doctor showed the chart. A maternal grandmother who died of kidney failure, 2 uncles who'd had transplants. How had Valerie never known this? Obsession began that afternoon. Valerie started watching Thomas with different eyes. She noticed the pallor he masked with spray tan, the exhaustion he covered with liters of coffee, the increasingly frequent trips to the restroom, blood pressure meds hidden in the desk drawer. Small signs that she, cleaning the house every day, was the only one to notice in full. Confirmation came unexpectedly. Thomas had left his laptop open in the office while he took a call in the garden. On the screen, his Google search history. Symptoms of kidney disease. Nephrologists in Los Angeles. Life expectancy without dialysis. But what chilled Valerie's blood was the document open in another tab. The Montgomery family medical history. Paternal grandmother died at 45 of kidney failure. Father saved by transplant at 43. Uncle on dialysis since 40. Valerie did the math. Thomas was 42. That night she made the decision that would change 2 lives. She began obsessively researching genetic compatibility, transplants, umbilical cords. She discovered that parent-child compatibility was 50% by chance, but there were tests that could predict with 90% accuracy even during pregnancy. She started frequenting the public library after work, devouring medical books she barely understood. She created a false account on the library computer to access scientific articles. The plan took shape slowly. Like a puzzle assembled in the dark, she would do every possible test during the pregnancy. If the baby were compatible, the umbilical cord would be preserved. Stem cells could save Thomas when the time came, and it would come, she was sure. The signs were all there. The morning of the party, Valerie packed her few things in the small back room where she'd slept since she started working there. 3 changes of clothes, documents, the envelope with $15,000 saved from 3 years of wages. Mrs. Nora Connor appeared at the door at 6 a.m. as arranged. The worry-lined face couldn't hide the fear in her eyes. Are you sure about this, my daughter? Running away like this? Without telling him? Mrs. Connor sat on the narrow bed, taking her daughter's hands. That man has a right to know he's going to be a father. Valerie knelt before her mother, something she hadn't done since she was a child. Mom, if I tell him now, he'll think it's a scam. He'll sue me, demand a DNA test, turn this pregnancy into a legal hell. And when he finds out he's sick, it will be too late. The baby needs to be born in peace, away from all this. It's the only chance he has. Chance at what, Valerie? You're not making sense. That's when Valerie told her everything. The signs of the disease, the research, the plan to preserve the umbilical cord. Mrs. Connor listened in silence, her face shifting from fear to astonishment, then to something like sad pride. You're saving the life of a man who doesn't even know he needs saving, her mother whispered. But what about you, my daughter? Will you raise this child alone? Will you give up everything? I'm not giving anything up, Mom. I'm choosing to do the right thing, even if no one ever knows. Isn't that how you raised me? Do the right thing even when no one's looking. Mrs. Connor hugged her daughter, silent tears slipping down. Where will you go? To the countryside in Minnesota. A friend from school has a boarding house there. I can work as a seamstress until the baby is born. I've already arranged it. Valerie took an envelope from her pocket. It was addressed to Thomas Montgomery, sealed. If something happens to me in childbirth, give this to him. Explain everything. But only if something happens to me. Promise. Mrs. Connor took the envelope with trembling hands. I promise. The video went viral in less than 12 hours. Millionaire humiliates pregnant maid had 2 million views before sunrise. Marina Vance, with her impeccable timing as a vindictive ex-wife, had posted it on every social network with the caption, "Meet the real Thomas Montgomery." Thomas woke to a phone exploding. Calls from partners, messages from clients, notifications of tags and posts he didn't even want to see. The lead attorney called at 7 in the morning. Thomas, do you have any idea how bad this is? The company lost 3 contracts just this morning. The Swiss ambassador canceled the meeting. Investors are panicking. I'm going to find her, Thomas answered, his voice hoarse from a sleepless night. I'm going to fix this. He hired 3 different private investigators. Together they cost $5,000 a day, but money wasn't the problem. The problem was that Valerie had simply evaporated. No credit cards used, phone off, no relatives besides her mother, who swore she knew nothing. The household staff whispered in corners. The cook, Mrs. Mary, was the only one brave enough to speak directly. You messed up badly, Mr. Thomas. That girl was an angel. 3 years here, never took a cent, never missed a day. And you treated her like trash in front of everyone. She's pregnant with my child and didn't tell me a thing. Thomas exploded. What did you expect me to do? To act like a human being, not a monster. It was the first time in 3 years Mrs. Mary had ever spoken to him like that. Thomas realized he had lost more than a maid. He had lost the respect of everyone who worked for him. But the worst was yet to come. 2 weeks after the incident, during a crucial meeting with Japanese investors, Thomas felt the first sharp stab in his kidneys. A knife-edge pain that knocked the breath out of him mid-presentation. He excused himself, went to the restroom, and saw blood in his urine. He booked a doctor for the next day, convincing himself it was just stress. Mrs. Constance's boarding house in Red Wing had no sign out front, just a faded number barely visible on the whitewashed wall. Valerie arrived on a rainy Tuesday in April, her belly still discreet beneath a loose dress, carrying a suitcase that weighed less than her secrets. Her childhood friend Rose waited at the door with the same smile they'd shared over split lunches at school 20 years earlier. She didn't ask about the baby's father or the sudden flight from Los Angeles. She simply showed the back room and the Singer sewing machine that would be Valerie's livelihood for the months ahead. The disguise was simple but effective. Valerie became Mary Smith, a recent widow returning to the countryside after losing her husband in a workplace accident. The neighbors accepted the story without question, especially after she started doing alterations and repairs at fair prices. In 2 weeks, she had more orders than she could handle, but the seamstress work was only a front for her real mission. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Valerie caught the 6 a.m. bus to Minneapolis. 3 hours each way to undergo tests at a private clinic that accepted cash and didn't ask many questions. The money saved over 3 years melted quickly, each exam costing between $500 and $2,000. Detailed anatomy, ultrasound, amniocentesis, HLA compatibility testing, full genetic analysis. The doctor, Dr. Samuel Hayes, thought she was paranoid, but he kept ordering the tests she insisted were necessary. It was in the 20th week that the confirmation came. The baby was a boy and, more importantly, showed 92% compatibility with the genetic profile she'd submitted as belonging to the late husband. In truth, it was Thomas's DNA, collected from a strand of hair months earlier, back when she hadn't known she would be carrying his child. The compatibility was almost perfect, the rare kind of match doctors call a genetic lottery. This baby's umbilical cord would be a medical treasure. Valerie cried alone in the clinic bathroom for 20 minutes. They weren't tears of sadness, but of profound relief. The sacrifice would not be in vain. She spent the rest of the pregnancy meticulously preparing every detail. She researched the best umbilical cord bank in the country, paid the $15,000 for processing and storage with the last of her funds, using false documents identifying her as Mary Smith. While Valerie grew life inside her, Thomas withered without knowing. The first signs were easy to ignore. Fatigue he blamed on the stress of the viral scandal. Swollen legs he blamed on long hours on his feet. The pale skin he tried to hide with stronger and stronger self-tanner. But he couldn't ignore the scale showing 11 pounds lost in 2 months, despite eating normally. The pharmaceutical empire he'd built over 15 years began to feel his absence. Last-minute canceled meetings when fatigue flattened him. Important decisions delayed because he couldn't focus. The partners whispered about temporarily removing him from the presidency. Marina, the ex-wife, showed up with increasing frequency, feigning concern while planting seeds of doubt about his mental capacity. "You look awful, Thomas," she said one afternoon, finding him napping in the office at 3 p.m. "When's the last time you had lab work done?" "I'm fine, just tired." It's this whole thing with Valerie. I can't stop thinking about where she is if the baby's okay. Marina rolled her eyes. Forget that little maid. She probably invented the whole pregnancy to extort you. Did you see the way she refused the money? Pure theater. She's probably waiting for you to offer more. But Thomas knew Valerie better than that. In 3 years, he had never seen her lie, not even about small things. If she said she was pregnant, she was. If she said the child was his, he was. The memory of that single night returned in torturous flashes. Her trying to console him after Marina shredded his pride in the divorce. Him seeking in her arms a comfort he couldn't find anywhere else. The awkward morning after, both pretending nothing had happened. Detective Morales charged $2,000 a day and had delivered nothing but frustration so far. Seated in Thomas's office on a sweltering July afternoon, he flipped through a pathetic file of false leads. She's a professional, Mr. Montgomery. No cards, no social media, no registered cell phone. It's like she evaporated. Nobody just disappears in today's America, Thomas insisted, massaging his temples to ease the constant headache. Everyone leaves a digital trail. Not when they plan the escape meticulously. Look, I ran down every person she knew. The mother truly knows nothing, or she's the best actress I've ever seen. Neighborhood friends lost contact. Former co-workers from other jobs haven't heard from her in years. It's like she cut every tie on purpose. Thomas looked out the 15th floor window, the city stretching as far as he could see. Somewhere out there, Valerie was carrying his child. By now she'd be 7, maybe 8 months along, big belly, swollen feet, sleeping poorly. Going through all of it alone out of pride or some plan he couldn't understand. "Keep looking," he ordered, signing another check for $15,000. "I want to know about any pregnant woman who shows up in hospitals with a similar name, approximate age, anything." Morales pocketed the check. "Mr. Montgomery, may I be frank? In 20 years on the job, I've never seen anyone search so hard for a person who clearly doesn't want to be found. Why is this so important?" Thomas didn't answer immediately. How could he explain that he woke every night with the image of her walking out that door? How could he say that the disappointment in her eyes haunted him more than any business failure? How could he admit that, for the first time in his life, he felt he had lost something irreplaceable? March 15th arrived with surgical precision. Valerie had calculated everything based on the patterns she'd observed. The Montgomery family's hereditary kidney disease fully manifested around 42 and a half. Thomas would turn 43 in June. March was the perfect moment for the birth, allowing time for the umbilical cord processing to be complete when the crisis came. Labor started at 4 in the morning, but Valerie waited until 8 to go to the hospital. She didn't want to seem desperate. She didn't want to attract attention. She was admitted as Mary Smith, a routine mother in labor with no companion. When the nurses asked about the father, she said he was traveling for work. When they offered to call someone, she politely declined. The baby was born at 2:23 p.m. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, 20 inches long, perfect in every detail. When they placed him on her chest, Valerie saw Thomas in miniature. The same blue eyes that would one day turn cold as ice. The same determined jaw. Even the hands, tiny but already showing the father's long fingers. "What's the little prince's name?" the nurse asked, preparing the paperwork. "Hector," Valerie answered, remembering that Thomas had once mentioned it was the name of the grandfather he admired. Hector Smith. The umbilical cord was collected with medical precision. 80 milliliters of stem cell-rich blood processed and cryopreserved in under 48 hours. The certificate bore the name Mary Smith, but Valerie knew that wouldn't be a problem when the time came. She had left a sample of Thomas's DNA at the cord bank. When necessary, compatibility would speak for itself. Thomas fainted during the quarterly presentation to shareholders. 1 second, he was explaining the 15% drop in profits. The next, he was on the marble floor with 50 people panicking around him. He woke in the ambulance with a paramedic taking his blood pressure. 220 over 140, numbers that meant his kidneys were failing. Dr. Claude Reynolds didn't waste time with euphemisms. A nephrology specialist for 30 years, he had seen this pattern before. "Mr. Montgomery, your kidneys are functioning at 25% capacity. This is stage 4 renal failure. We need to start dialysis immediately and put you on the transplant list." "How long do I have?" Thomas asked, his voice strangely calm. "Without dialysis? 3 weeks, maybe a month." With dialysis, we can buy years, but quality of life, well, you'll be tied to a machine 3 times a week, 4 hours per session. And the transplant? The public wait list has 5,000 people. Average wait time, 5 years. Privately, we can sometimes cut that to 2 or 3 years, if we're lucky. Thomas did the math. 2 years of dialysis would destroy what was left of the company. 3 years would break his sanity. 5 years, he wouldn't make it. And if I find a compatible donor, now that's a different story. With a compatible living donor, we can do the surgery in a matter of weeks, but the compatibility has to be very strong. Your tests show some rare markers. It's going to be hard to find a match, even among relatives. I don't have any close living relatives. Dr. Reynolds checked the chart. What about children? I see here you're 42, the age to have teenagers or young adults. The word child hit Thomas like a punch. Somewhere, his child had been born. Now about 9 months old, maybe crawling, babbling first words, a child he had never met, whom Valerie hid from him like buried treasure. I don't have children, he lied, because explaining the truth meant admitting a failure too big to fit in that hospital room. The letter arrived on Thomas's 21st day of hospitalization, when the doctors were already talking about palliative care and a will. The brown envelope, with no return address, was delivered by the receptionist along with the hospital bills piling up on the bedside table. Thomas almost threw it away, thinking it was another charge, but something about the weight caught his attention. Inside, a lab result and a note typed in a plain font. The test showed 92% compatibility for a kidney transplant. Matching blood type, human leukocyte antigens nearly identical, negative cross-match. It was the kind of compatibility doctors called a statistical miracle, the kind that happens in one case out of 500,000. The note had only one line. The Savior has always been closer than you think. Thomas called Dr. Reynolds immediately, the paper trembling in his weak hands. The doctor examined the result for long minutes, checking each marker, each number, looking for signs of forgery. There were none. The test was real, recent, dated 3 days earlier at a reputable lab in Minneapolis. "This is impossible," Dr. Reynolds murmured, adjusting his glasses for the 3rd time. "This level of compatibility, it would only be possible with a very close relative, a twin maybe, or..." He paused, looking at Thomas with clinical curiosity. "Or a child. Mr. Montgomery, are you absolutely sure you have no children?" The question hung in the sterilized air of the room. Thomas felt the world spin, not from illness, but from an understanding assembling itself in his mind like a puzzle solving on its own. Valerie, the pregnancy, the calculated disappearance, 9 months gone by. He did the math with the precision of a man who had calculated profits all his life. If she was 3 months along when she fled, the baby would have been born 3 months ago. Enough time to process compatibility tests. Thomas ripped off the cardiac monitor electrodes and got out of bed for the first time in days. His legs wobbled, but determination was stronger than weakness. He called Morales, the investigator, ignoring the protests of the nurse who rushed into the room. "Search birth records in Minnesota for the last 4 months. Mother with a name similar to Valerie or any variation. Also look for recent renal compatibility tests. Private labs, public, any. And Morales, this is life or death now." Literally! He spent the next 48 hours in an obsessive investigation that consumed his last reserves of strength. Marina showed up at the hospital, feigning concern while checking whether he had updated his will. The partners called, asking about powers of attorney for urgent decisions. Everyone already burying him while he fought to assemble the most important puzzle of his life. It was Mrs. Mary, the cook, who inadvertently provided the crucial clue. Visiting him at the hospital with a container of homemade soup, she mentioned running into Mrs. Nora, Valerie's mother, at the municipal market. Poor thing, she was buying diapers and formula. She said it was for donation to a charity, but I saw tears in her eyes. She must miss her daughter, poor soul. Diapers, formula, tears in her eyes. Thomas connected the dots with the clarity of someone finally seeing after months in the dark. Mrs. Nora knew where Valerie was. More than that, she was probably helping with the baby, his child, who could save him. Morales called 3 hours later with confirmation. I found something, Mr. Montgomery. St. Luke's Hospital in Minneapolis, March 15th. A certain Mary Smith admitted for a routine delivery. Matching age, physical description fits, paid everything in cash. And there's more. At the same hospital 3 days ago, renal compatibility tests were run. The requisition was in the name Mary Smith, but the reference DNA, Morales paused for dramatic effect, was yours. How she got your DNA is a mystery, but it was definitely yours. Thomas found Valerie exactly where instinct said she would be, in the pediatric wing at St. Luke's, doing more routine tests on Hector. She had her back to him when he entered the clinic, rocking the baby who whimpered after the blood draw. 3 months of nursing had made her body fuller, more maternal. Her hair was longer, twisted into a careless bun. She wore simple cotton clothes, a far cry from the starched uniform she'd worn at the mansion. 47 tests during the pregnancy, Thomas said, his voice hoarse with emotion and illness. You did 47 tests to make sure he would be compatible with me. Valerie turned slowly, as if she had known this moment would come. Hector lay in her arms, blue eyes identical to his father's, studying the stranger with childish curiosity. The clinic suddenly seemed too small to contain the whole unspoken history between them. How did you find me? She asked simply, without denying anything. You wanted me to find you. The letter, the compatibility test, it was a map. For a terrible moment, they just stared at each other. Then Thomas realized they weren't alone. In a cruel twist of fate, or perhaps some cosmic design with a dark sense of humor, several of the executives from that fateful party were at the hospital. The Swiss ambassador visiting a colleague, 2 of Thomas's partners waiting on executive checkup results. Marina, because of course Marina would be there, sniffing out drama like a shark smells blood. They all began to drift closer, drawn by the magnetism of a scandal unfolding. Is it him? Thomas asked, ignoring the gathering audience, his eyes fixed on the baby. Is he my son? He always was, Valerie replied, lifting her chin the same way she had 9 months earlier. From the first second, he was always your son. You were just slow to realize it. Marina stepped forward with her phone already recording, because some people never change. Wow, what a touching scene. The little maid is back to extort the dying boss. Valerie didn't even look at her. She kept her eyes on Thomas, seeing beyond the weakened executive to the broken man she had comforted on a night that now felt like it belonged to another life. Hector, she said softly, this is your father. You knew, Thomas said, full understanding finally crashing over him like an avalanche. You always knew about the family kidney disease. That's why you did all this." Valerie walked to the clinic window, still holding Hector, who now slept peacefully, oblivious to the drama unfolding around him. "Your grandmother died of renal failure at 45. Your father only survived because he got a transplant from his own brother at 43. Your uncle has been on dialysis since 40. The pattern was obvious to anyone who wanted to see it. And you saw it. I saw it because I paid attention. Because while you pretended you were invincible, I saw the blood pressure meds you hid, the exhaustion you masked with coffee, the increasingly frequent trips to the restroom. I saw it because, unlike everyone around you, I had nothing to gain by pretending everything was fine." The Swiss ambassador whispered something to the executive beside him. Marina kept filming. The audience grew, nurses and doctors realizing something extraordinary was happening. "You could have told me," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "You could have warned me about the disease, about the pregnancy, about the plan." Valerie laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Told you what? Hi, boss, you're going to die in 2 years, but don't worry. I'm pregnant with your child, and I'm going to save your life? Would you have believed me? Or would you have accused me of a scam, sued me, and turned my pregnancy into a legal circus?" She was right, and everyone knew it. The Thomas from 9 months ago would have reacted exactly that way. "So you disappeared," he said, processing the magnitude of the choice. "You spent the pregnancy alone, doing tests, preparing." "It wasn't a sacrifice," Valerie corrected. "It was a choice. I chose to give my son the chance to know his father. I chose to give you the chance to know your son. And yes, I chose to save your life, not because you deserved it, but because Hector deserves to have a father." Valerie picked up a folder from the exam table. She took out a document Thomas recognized immediately: authorization for the use of biological material for transplant. Without that signature, even with all the compatibility in the world, the procedure couldn't happen. 92% compatibility, she said, professional, as if presenting a report back at the old mansion. The umbilical cord is cryopreserved at the best bank in the country. The stem cells are viable and abundant. With the transplant, you have a 95% chance of full recovery. "And your conditions?" Thomas asked, because he knew Valerie well enough to know there would be conditions. "First, immediate acknowledgement of paternity. I want Hector registered with your name. Officially your son." She paused, glancing around at the crowd of witnesses. "Second, back child support from birth and a monthly support payment of $5,000 until he turns 25. Third, an education fund of $500,000 to make sure he has the same opportunities you had." Marina nearly choked. $500,000, that's extortion. "No," Valerie replied calmly. "Extortion would be charging the millions his life is worth. I'm asking for what's fair to raise our son." "And if I refuse?" Thomas asked. Not because he was considering it, but because he needed to hear the answer. Valerie met his eyes with the same unshakable dignity she'd shown when she walked out of the mansion 9 months earlier. "Then you die. And Hector grows up knowing his father chose pride over life. But that choice is yours. It always has been." The silence in the clinic was absolute. 50 people held their breath, waiting for the answer. The Swiss ambassador had stopped whispering. Marina had lowered her phone. Everyone understood they were witnessing something that transcended social scandal. It was life and death, balanced on one man's decision. "Where are the papers?" Thomas asked. "I want to sign everything right now, in front of all these witnesses." Thomas signed each document with a trembling hand, not because of the illness consuming his body, but because of the magnitude of the moment. The pen felt as heavy as lead, each signature an acknowledgement of everything he had denied. There, before 50 witnesses, some of the very same who had seen his cruelty 9 months earlier, he recognized Hector as his son. He signed on to back child support of $45,000. He agreed to monthly support of $5,000. He authorized the creation of an education fund of $500,000. Marina tried one last poisonous gambit. "You're being manipulated, Thomas." She planned this from the start, got pregnant on purpose, ran away to create drama, came back at just the right time to play the hero. It's an elaborate con. Valerie didn't defend herself. She only adjusted Hector in her arms, the baby now awake and taking everything in with those blue eyes that were a perfect copy of his father's. It was the Swiss ambassador who, surprisingly, broke the silence. "Ms. Vance, I was at the party. I saw how Mr. Montgomery treated this young woman. If she planned anything, it was to save the life of a man who didn't deserve it. That's not a con. It's a miracle." The surgery had been such a success that the doctors were still talking about it in the hospital corridors. The transplant using stem cells from the umbilical cord, combined with a compatible deceased donor kidney that miraculously became available the same week, had restored to Thomas not only his health, but something he had lost long before the illness, his humanity. The first supervised visit took place in a public park far from the mansion that carried so many bitter memories. Thomas arrived 15 minutes early, anxiety gnawing at his newly restored insides. When Valerie appeared with Hector in the stroller, the 9-month-old already crawling with determination, Thomas felt his now healthy heart race as it never had during any multi-million-dollar negotiation. "He likes mashed banana with oatmeal for breakfast," Valerie said, professional as ever, handing over a bag of baby things. "He naps for 2 hours after lunch. He doesn't like loud noises. If he cries, sing that song your mother used to sing to you, it always works." "How do you know my mother's song?" "Mrs. Mary told me. She said you used to hum it when you thought you were alone in the office." Hector looked at Thomas with curiosity, no fear but no recognition either. He reached out his chubby little hand and gripped his father's finger with surprising strength. In that moment, Thomas finally understood there were things no money on earth could buy, but that Valerie had given him for free, a second chance at life and at fatherhood. The Invisible Mothers Foundation occupied 3 floors of a building in downtown Los Angeles. What had begun as a gesture of reparation had become one of the most respected organizations supporting single mothers in the country. Valerie ran it all with the same quiet efficiency with which she had once run the Montgomery mansion, but now her organizational talent saved lives instead of serving coffee. Her office looked out toward Griffith Park with simple but comfortable furniture and an entire wall covered with photos. They weren't shots of social events or awards, though the foundation had received many. They were photos of the 1,500 women who had received help. Mothers who had finished college, opened businesses, left abusive relationships, all with the support of a foundation that offered everything from emergency financial aid to job training and psychological counseling. Thomas showed up every Friday at 3 o'clock sharp. No longer the arrogant businessman in a $20,000 suit, but a man in jeans and a simple shirt carrying Hector on his shoulders. The 3.5-year-old boy was a perfect blend of his parents, his mother's quiet determination, his father's sharp intelligence, and a kindness that seemed to have been born from the very story of resilience surrounding him. Mom, Dad said I'm going to have a sister," Hector announced that particular Friday, running into Valerie's arms. Valerie looked at Thomas, one eyebrow arched in question. He raised his hands in defense. It's not what you're thinking. Marina is pregnant by her new husband. Hector misheard. I did not, Hector protested. Aunt Marina said her baby is going to be my sister because Dad was married to her before. Hector, Valerie knelt to his height. Family isn't just about blood or who was married to whom. Family is about who cares, who loves, who shows up. You have a complete family, Mom, Dad, Grandma Nora, and all the aunties here at the foundation who love you. The boy thought for a moment, that serious expression that was pure Thomas. So, Aunt Marina's baby isn't my real sister? She can be your friend if you want, Valerie explained patiently. But a real brother or sister is something else. Thomas watched the exchange with something close to reverence. 3 years on, and Valerie still surprised him with her ability to turn complicated situations into life lessons. She had never accepted his proposals for a romantic reconciliation, keeping a cordial but firmly platonic relationship focused solely on Hector. He respected that, even though it hurt. It was the price of past cruelty, and he paid it consciously every day. Mr. Montgomery, a voice called from the door. It was Carla, one of the foundation's beneficiaries holding a diploma. I did it. I graduated in nursing. I start at St. Luke's Hospital next week. Valerie hugged the woman, tears of joy shared between them. Thomas watched from a distance, still uncomfortable with public displays of affection, but genuinely moved. Carla was the 100th professional to graduate with the foundation's support. Each one a living testament that second chances, when well used, can change the world. Later, while Hector played in the foundation's playground with other children, Valerie and Thomas sat on a bench watching. The silence between them was no longer heavy like before, but filled with an understanding that transcended words. You saved more than my life, Thomas said at last. You saved my soul. It wasn't me, Valerie replied, looking at Hector, who was now helping a smaller girl climb the slide. It was him. Hector saved both of us. He gave me purpose when I was just an invisible maid. He gave you humanity when you were just a walking wallet. He gave us a chance to be better than we were. Valerie, I know I don't deserve it, but I have to ask one more time. Is there any chance we can be a real family, not for Hector, but for us? She stayed silent so long that Thomas thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice carried 3 years of reflection. Thomas, you've changed. That's undeniable. But some wounds leave scars that don't fade. I forgave you. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. We can be Hector's parents. We can be partners in raising him. But we can't be a couple. That ship sailed that night 3 years ago, and it's not coming back to port. Thomas nodded, the pain of definitive rejection mixed with resigned acceptance. I understand, and I accept. But I want you to know I'll spend the rest of my life proving I've changed, not to win you back, but because Hector deserves a father he can be proud of. He already is, Valerie said softly. Yesterday he told me that when he grows up, he wants to be like his dad, helping people who need it. In that moment, watching their son help other children on the playground, the two of them understood the fundamental truth that had guided this entire journey. Hector hadn't been conceived on that night of weakness and loneliness 3.5 years earlier. He was conceived the moment Valerie chose to save a man who didn't deserve saving. He was gestated in 9 months of silent sacrifice. He was born when a father acknowledged a son before 50 witnesses, and he was growing every day as living proof that love, even unlikely, can turn the impossible into the inevitable. The maid who left pregnant wasn't running away. She was planting the seed of redemption that would save not only a man from physical death, but a soul from spiritual death. And the millionaire who humiliated her discovered late, but not too late, that true wealth isn't counted in figures, but in second chances well used. In the Invisible Mothers Foundation's annual report that year, highlighted on the front page, was the mission Valerie had written. Every mother deserves to be seen. Every child deserves to be loved. Every father deserves a chance to make things right. And every family, no matter how it is formed, deserves dignity. Below, in smaller letters, the dedication that few fully understood for Hector, who saved 2 lives before he was even born, and for all the Valeries in the world who choose the difficult path of love when it would be easier to choose hate. The sun set over Los Angeles, painting the sky the same color of hope Valerie had carried alone for 9 months. In the playground, Hector laughed, pure and free, the living proof that some sacrifices are worth every tear shed. His parents, united forever by their love for him, but separated forever by the scars of the past, watched in peace. It wasn't the fairy tale happy ending, but it was real, it was honest, and it was enough. After all, not every love story ends with a kiss. Some end with forgiveness, others with understanding. And the most precious ones, like this, end with the certainty that true love isn't what binds 2 people together, but what transforms them into better versions of themselves, even if it's too late for them to be together.